Hello, I'm Scott Monfort. I'm the Extension Peanut Agronomist at the University of Georgia. And you may ask, what in the world are we bringing to you at the end of the season? As you can see in the background, we do have a tractor inverting peanuts. Well, today I want to bring to you a little bit about seed quality. And again, you may say, well, why are we talking about it now? Well, guess what? There are things that happen all through the year and even into the next year when you pick up that bag of seed that causes problems to seed quality. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that briefly here. I'm going to divide it into three different scenarios or three different parts so that we can kind of dissect out some of the issues that we commonly see that affect seed quality. I'm going to start out talking about one situation that caused more problems this past year than any other in the past several years, and that's Aspergillus flavus and Niger. Yes, we have these problems every once in a while, but last year going into the 2020 growing season was one of the worst I've ever seen. So it was bad. It was mainly driven by the weather at harvest in 2019, and so you have to keep that kind of by itself because that caused a major issue. Now I want to kind of dissect around that and talk about the things we see from year to year. And so as we go through this, again, I'm going to divide this up into three different segments. One is a segment when we grow seed the previous year. The second segment is talking about what we do once we harvest that seed in that given year and we put it in the warehouse all the way through the point of which we get ready to shell it out. And then we're going to talk about what happens with that seed once we shell it out, put it in a bag, and it either stays in a warehouse or goes to your farm. So let's talk about number one. What happens in the year that we grow the seed before we get it? As a grower, this is where you help yourself out if you're a seed producer for the people for the next year that get that seed. One, we want to get the best stand as possible, you know that, but before we put that seed in the ground, we want to make sure that we take our soil samples and we correct any fertility issues or deficiencies that we might have, pH, before we put that seed in the ground. Once we put it in the ground, we want to get a good stand, so we got to do everything we can there, you know, insecticides, fungicides, whatever it needs to be to get a good stand. Then we got to protect that crop with the fungicides all the way through the growing year. We don't need to skimp on fungicides. We don't want to do just a Bravo tebuconazole type program when we have major disease issues. Before you ever put that seed in the ground, there is one thing we need to make sure of. We don't put it in a field that has less than 2 years out of peanut. That's a 3-year rotation. We want to make sure we have good rotation. That helps us with disease issues. We also, when we plant it, we get it up, we protect it from then all the way through the growing season. That means insecticides for insect problems. That means herbicides. That means not having a lot of weed pressure that may affect the quality of that seed or the yield of that seed. Again, the disease is a big deal. We want to make sure we manage diseases. We don't want just a Bravo Teb type program, a bare bones program, not with seed production. We also want to make sure we do all the fertility that we need to, boron. We make sure we put gypsum on, so that we can get that crop produced as high quality as we can. We got to irrigate all the way through the growing season. We don't want to do this in dry land situations. So that if we do all of that, from a grower perspective, we at least ensure what we produce is the highest seed as possible. You know, when we get to the end of the season, we need to harvest it when they're mature as possible. So again, that seed is ready at higher quality as possible. Now, once we take it to the buying point, that's where the buying point really can do a lot of things to help themselves out too, right? When we bring seed in, we need to check that and make sure that, okay, this is from a seed field, didn't have any problems. We need to make sure when it comes in that it's not at field dry situation. Hopefully they harvested it at a higher moisture, so when they bring it in, you can slowly dry it down. And that'll kind of protect that seed a little bit more, make sure the viability of that seed is good. And then we put it in a warehouse with other good quality seed. We don't want to put it in warehouses that have dry land corners mixed in with it or lower quality seed. We want to make sure that we put it in there with other high quality seed, again, ensuring that what we get out of when we start shelling is high quality seed. We also want to make sure that we don't put it in a warehouse that have problems. In other words, fan issues, or in a situation we can't get airflow through the warehouse when it needs to. We also want to make sure that we don't have any leaks. And I know all of the buying points do this, or at least I hope they do. I think all the ones I know make sure that everything is where it needs to be and up to a certain level so that they maintain good seed. So this is just a reminder. Now let's talk about a third thing. Once we get it to a point, we get it out of a warehouse, we've held it for a couple of months, we get it out of the warehouse and we want to start shelling this crop for seed. Well, guess what? If we're starting to shell in January and we're going to take that seed and put it in a warehouse, and it's going to be a couple of months, and then we're going to bring it in, bring those totes back in, we're going to treat it and give it to growers. We got to be mindful of how we handle that seed, of how long it stays in certain warehouses, because if we go through hot winters like we did in 2016, 2017, even last year, we had relatively warm temperatures and a lot of humidity. We got to make sure they're in good warehouses so that they get good ventilation. We have been doing a lot of research in this area. Once we shell that crop, put it in a bag, whether it's a tote or a bag, what happens to that germ after it sits for a long period of time? If it's in a good ventilated warehouse where the temperatures don't fluctuate that much, we see that the germs and quality remain about the same all the way through. If it goes into a trailer and it goes up under a shed and it's out in the air like this today, and you have a lot of fluctuations of humidity and temperature, guess what? Over time, that germ's going to start coming down more rapidly than what it would be in a more protected environment. Would say from a grower perspective too, if you go and pick up that seed in March and you put it in a van body and it sits from March until the 1st of May, guess what? You've put it in a non-ventilated situation where the sun, even in cooler days, has heated up that inside of that truck, and it's going to cause that germ to go down more rapidly. So we got to take care of that seed, put it in the best area that we can, so we don't have these high fluctuations of temperatures and humidity. Now when we get that seed and we put it in our planters, guess what? There's still a few things that we can do to maximize our stands. Don't go too fast. Make sure that our planters are set right. Make sure you look at the seed before you put it in the hoppers. You got a lot of splits or that seed doesn't look very good. Why are we planting it? We don't need to plant that. Take it back, ask for better seed. We hadn't had that situation but once or twice. But the thing about it is we need to know what we're planting. We also need to know what the germ is that we're planting. If you've never asked what that germ is from the buying point, I would ask. Not that, it may be 90% germ, maybe 80. That's still fine. Georgia regulations say that as long as it's 75% germ or better, they can sell that seed, and that's what you have to plant. So as long as we're above 75%, we can plant it as considered to be good germ seed. But we need to know what the overall germ is. If it's an 80 versus a 75, or a 90 versus a 75, that's a big difference in germ. You need to bump your seeding rates up a little bit. And so we just need to know that so that we can make sure you need to know that so that you can get a good stand. Now the final thing for people to think about is when we plant that seed also is what we put in there with that seed, in fur with that seed that can hurt us. Now we don't recommend anything going in fur except for fungicides or insecticides or inoculants. We don't really want a in-fur fertilizer at all in that seed because it can potentially cause problems. I know that there are some fertilizers that are low salts or have low salt formulations, but the problem is it puts you at risk, and we had that happen this year. We had people that went in and put 1 to 2 gallons of an in-fur fertilizer with the seed, and guess what? We got, instead of 5 plants per foot, we got 1 to 2 plants per foot. And the reason that we know that was a problem is the guy had a in-fur inoculant tube that was bent and spraying outside of the fur, and guess what? That one row come up perfectly. So we know the fertilizer caused a problem. So please, don't do that if we can get away with it. And I think if we take care of this seed the way we talked about, when we grow it, when the buying points take it in, they dry it down, they put it up, as long as we do those things right, and as long as growers, again, you take that seed when you go get it in at the buying point to plant, you take care of it. You do the things that you need to do, and again, like I mentioned earlier, you've got to make sure that you take care of any deficiencies in the field. Make sure that we're not, putting that seed in a situation that it's going to fight for its life from the beginning. Also, make sure that we're doing all those little things with the planters, not putting too much stuff in furrow and all that. And I think if we do that and we watch the weather, don't put it in bad temperatures or low temperatures to begin with. Make sure you have good moisture. Don't chase moisture. And like I said, just do everything that we know, that we recommend, we put out for you guys. If y'all follow those guidelines, I think we'll get a good stand up. We can't do a single thing about Mother Nature, and we just have to work with her. And if we can do that, I think we'll be okay. But just a few things to throw out there for you to think about. And again, we're at the end of this harvest season, but again, this is the time to think about it. So I do appreciate your time. Again, I'm Scott Monfort with the University of Georgia.